the only other thing I'd say is if your company or somebody is hiring or wants to support the review community, we're always accepting more sponsors. Because we don't have anybody, we don't like get anybody out here, but we would love to get like a big name flying out here and like do a presentation. We actually had that scheduled with Tenderlove a while ago, and if we had enough money, we'd love to do that again. So.
Yeah. What's the future of this space? Like,
They just renewed their lease.
okay.
So
Good news.
I think we are partially
Part of the.
factored in.
Yeah. As part of the, let's renew because this is good for the community.
Yeah. So that was, I was talking to Joel before this, so that was kind of like, what are we gonna do? And we procrastinated long enough that we don't have to think about it. It serves me again, just perfect.
Yeah. They say procrastination never wins.
Essentially, I read a book recently that said that Adam Grant talks about it, where procrastination can actually be super helpful if you sort of prepared and then waited and then like crammed it in. So like Martin Luther King wrote the speech overnight, the night before, the I Have a Dream speech.
Someone said that this was like what they learned from the book Shogun, which was a hot TV show this past summer.
Yeah.
Which is like the guy who's in charge waits till the very last minute because that's the only way you can have all the most information possible. And so like, yeah, it's a giant book, and that's what the one thing they took.
I take it away.
Maybe less procrastination and more gestation.
That's one way to look at it for sure. Yeah.
It's all about branding.
Adam Grant is really interesting to read though.
Yeah.
That dude is phenomenally smart. I actually hate him a little bit. Cool. I think that's it then we can turn it over. Dan, you want to intro Ben for the second in a row?
I will. So yeah, since Ben's second presentation in 2 months, he's doing a double header for us. Thank you. Ben is a software developer with passion for backend development,
Now you're gone.
and he wants to solve complex puzzles through self-determination, collaboration, and some grit. So Ben's going to be talking about locals, how to use them in your app. Take it away, Ben.
All right, thanks.
The glory down there.
It's been like this the whole time. Oh, no.
You can move over.
Hey,
to the chair.
Spike, how you doing? All right, so we all remember this application from last time, and we hooked up some turbo frames and such. And then last time when we were working on it, just jumping in, this is on purpose. We ran into a weird error at one point. We've all seen this. What does it mean? Who knows? Undefined local variable or method resource for an instance of class. Oh, well, funny thing, in honor of our annual Joel Huxley presentation night here, we're going to discuss Rails pull request 45602.
It's a good year.
Wait for it. By our own Joel Huxley. Thanks, Joel. And all questions after the presentation will be diverted to Joel. But if you want to go look at what it's all about, it's pretty cool. It's fun. It's this feature was implemented into Rails 7.1. So it comes there, and what it is it's strict locals. So anytime you use a partial in Rails, you can define which local variables it can accept. So with that, what we will do is, because this gives us no information, we're going to take a look into what's going on here. So you can see in this partial here resource, I have this going on here, which is a little bit confusing to some. And if you're a new developer trying to get into this, you're going to not know what's happening. So how we set this up is it's a magic comment where you find your locals. And in this case, it's going to be resource and resources. And you set them up like a hash like this, but in regular parentheses. And then it's a commented out magic line there. So now when we go back and we click that same tag, now instead of that really cryptic class method, class object error, now we get this really nice error message saying missing keywords, resources for the partial. So now I can go in there and look and be like, oh, well, when I look at where I'm replacing it from right here in this partial resource, I'm not passing it any variables. So if I look at the pattern I have set up, you can see here how I'm passing these locals similarly in another partial from another partial. So when we add this in here and we add our locals to be passed, we now get it working. Neato. So a little bit more, so that's the fundamentals of it. We can, for demonstration purposes, we'll go into a little bit more stuff here. And so if you have a partial, and this is great for refactoring. So every new partial that I get into in projects that I'm working on right now, I always add this statement in here, so it's very clear moving forward. Whenever I add something that I want to pass to that partial, or I remove something or anything, it's very clear on what needs to happen, and you get the exceptions as expected like that. So if you're meaning to never pass any variables and you want these to be methods, helper methods of sorts, then you can pass an empty locals like that. And then when you get here, then it says no locals accepted for this, which is pretty cool.
Okay, so you passed in the third one. Okay, so it literally does stuff. I thought it was.
Yeah, so then,
Wow.
yeah, so now, yeah, just like you're saying, Tim, like, so if we want to do a new local, new here, so I wanted to pass, let's say hypothetically, I wanted to pass this new local into it, and I only passed it in from here, defined it in my controller, passed it in here, and then now since I didn't put it in there, in the partial I'm passing it to, it says unknown local, new local being passed when I shouldn't be seeing that. So then you have to go and update your parcel that you're passing it to accept that local, which is pretty fun. And then on the last little bit here, so we have this set up, and let's say, so the three tabs on the right are all set up with the same convention. This budget calculator one is set up a little bit differently, but if we wanted to follow that same convention, and again, this is only for demonstration purposes, and I probably would not do this in the real world. We can do a similar thing, and this shows what else you can do with the strict locals here. So if I want to do the same thing, so since I'm not passing anything to the dashboards, right? For that tab, so we'll comment that out, right? So then it, as expected, we'll get the missing keywords. So then what we want to do here is we'll add our locals, and then all I'm going to do is I'm going to add the resource dashboard like this. And then I'm going to add a little if resource equals dash board. What we're going to want to do is we will render this partial. Or then we do this. So the reason I'm doing this is so that these locals that you pass in, you can set a default for them. And in no way would I ever want to do this because it defeats the purpose of having it local, is setting it to nil. But it's just for the purpose of saying that, hey, I can set this as something as a default before passing it. So now I don't have to set one for resources coming from the dashboard, which then now makes it work. the same way, so I can keep the convention going. And that's locals in a nutshell. Thanks, Joel. Yeah, it's one of my favorites, new features in Rails of like, just doing research on how it works. I came across the PR and I thought that's interesting and be a good time to give this presentation during our annual. Joel, thank you. Yeah.
This is the first line, it has to be the first line, comment it out like that.
I mean, that's just the way that I've set it up and like all the.
I don't think it could be moved around.
I'm not sure.
It has to be.
Well, yeah, because
Makes the most sense.
I was curious what.
I don't know, I forget, it's a regex that, believe it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's some wild stuff. There's so many funny stories with this. The main
Go
one
on.
is that DHH recently publicly described this feature as something that flew under his radar. And he's planning to rip it out. Or trying to. He said he wants to make it harder to use because he just don't like it.
That's on brand.
Yeah, I don't think he's gonna do a breaking change, but I don't know how he's gonna make it harder. The thing that I think that is most wild about this, can you go back to the PR?
Yeah.
That, go to the dev is actually how it works, so. Does everyone here know that like every template in Rails is compiled into a function or a method? So the whole premise of view component, when I built view component, was that like those methods they're anonymous effectively. So you can't interact with them, you can't unit test them. So I was like, oh, we should just make an object that we can't do all those things, including have a method signature. So what this effectively is doing is allowing you to add a method signature to that private method. So if you scroll down and go to, so we have this like has explicit locals, right? If you keep scrolling down and go to template, there's a regex, Tim, there you go. Would that pick it up on different lines? It's looking for the comment and the locals colon. I think that was
Right, I can't have it.
Anywhere to put it.
Try putting it at the, try putting it at the bottom of the file.
Such a small reg, right, concise.
I was really nervous writing a regex in the Rail.
Now you have two problems.
Okay, so you can put it anywhere in the.
What happens if you put two of them in there?
Oh, yeah.
Put one at. We'll just wrap it in. Should we do it?
Second one counts.
Just gotta make sure it comes
Yeah,
through.
change it to, do something different.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah, see which one wins.
Yeah.
Lazy.
The first one so far.
Keep them around.
Yeah, I was gonna.
Ooh. This is more testing than this feature has done.
Live coding.
There we go, yeah.
Yeah, first one wins.
Yeah.
So typical Rails top to bottom, right?
Yeah, I can go back to the diff because so that now let's see what happens with the regex match. So you have explicit locals regex, right?
Mhm.
You search for that in the file, in the page here. This feature is actually shockingly simple. It's literally just it's just a string interpolation.
Doggy chair.
Oh.
So look at this. If you have explicit locals, it
Removes it.
it extracts it out and sets explicit locals to be this value. So can you look up at explicit locals then? Because what this does is it literally, so Rails generates these functions, right? And it meta programs them. So all we're doing, if you look at method arguments here and compile, this is the method that compiles every template in Rails. It literally just says the argument, so that every compiled template function takes an argument of local assigns an output buffer. Unless you use this feature, and then it just takes output buffer, and then it literally is interpolating what was matched there. So if you can imagine writing Ruby, it's literally just taking that. That's why the default arguments work. You can literally reference an object in there that's in your code base in the default argument, because it's literally just string interpolating it into Ruby and evaluating on the method container that holds all your templates. So this is actually a very simple feature to write. It's not super complex. And in fact, I think that some of the stuff that's was added in here after I wrote it.
Oh.
Yeah, there it is right there. So you can see that's literally def. That's the compiled private. This method name is some long thing that includes the path to the template. And then that method arguments is literally all just the regex mesh, just injected in there.
Yeah.
How easy would it be to insert some Ruby into that to just run?
Into the regex.
I mean, it's a method argument, so you can run Ruby inside a method signature, right? Like you can have like X colon Y times 2 or like 2 times 4 or whatever. I don't know exactly what scope that executes in at that point. I think that would execute when you call it, right?
It's,
I'm asking the advanced Ruby author here.
it's evaluated when the object is, when the object is initialized in this case, so that method there, that depth that you have. It'll initialize any kind of default values, like if you had a key that has like 2 plus 4 as the value, that'll get evaluated at that time. Yeah.
Do you have like a bad idea for like what we do this?
Tom Betsy passwords.
Oh. I mean, this is still in template space, so it's like, it's probably,
Any sort of malicious code would be
right.
fun to see if you could run. I mean, you'd have to write it yourself, so.
Right, so it's no different than writing any malicious code anywhere else, right?
Yeah, it doesn't change anything.
Are we supporting?
Yeah,
Usually. Yeah, because I do this with the parameters gem. The parameters gem actually allows you to build message signatures dynamically, kind of doing what Joel's.
the reason you started writing that is because we were talking about this feature when I was building it.
Yeah. And I'm waiting, I have a PR in with the Ruby core team, and kind of excited to see them actually fix it so that you can actually get source code location. It's something that they're ironing out with the Prism gem, and then also the Ruby VM, like when you do or instruction sequences, and able to actually get back the raw source code. It's pretty neat because you can do some really interesting things, like what Joel's showing here, and what I do with the parameters gem, which is being able to build dynamic signatures. And have all your parameters get injected in there and build your class or your method at runtime, basically.
So why would you want to do that, like, Brooke?
Well, so a good example of this is actually, so it's called the Initable gem, something I released over the holiday break, which actually builds upon parameters and allows you to basically have a one-liner for constructing your objects now. So what's really cool is you can say like class demo, and then you include an initable, and then in brackets you put in your parameter list, which is basically a reverse of how parameters works on methods in Ruby. If you've ever looked at that, it's always a tuple, an array of tuples. It'll have a type, like if it's a keyword argument, right? It would be a key if it's optional, or a key rec if it's required. And so you can write it out that way, and it can be just a single one-liner. And now you don't have to set up to initialize. You don't have to do the @ symbol to assign the parameters that are coming in. And you don't have to do an attribute reader to get the bare width pattern to make them private to your object. So you get a one-liner to construct your objects. It's really cool.
It's like dry initializer.
It's like, yeah, it's a little like dry initializer, except dry initializer they put a little bit of syntactical sugar on it to say like, is it an option? Is it required? And then like default values, but you end up having, your class ends up being more vertical when you do that. And what I'm doing with Initable is I'm making it, you can go vertical if you want to, but I allow it to be horizontal. So you can really essentially get a one-liner for constructing your objects, which is, it's really cool. I've been using it a lot. It's like amazing. It just collapses down your class size significantly.
And tertiary code is better, is that right?
Sorry?
Tertiary code is better. I'm sorry, I was just being asked.
Oh.
That's a joke, everybody.
You could make a complaint like that. But if you're using if you're using like more than 3 parameters anyway, that's kind of like the rule of 3. Like there's something wrong, right? There's an object that needs to be born that should be actually extracted out and then injected using normal dependency injection at that point. So you should try to break down your objects at that point.
Good response.
So the answer for using this specifically is that it's a significant performance improvement on large code basis.
That's good.
Oh, because if you don't specify what locals the template accepts, Rails does not know. So it has to, every time you call the template, try to render the template with a new combination of locals keys, it recompiles it from disk on every boot.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we've done an optimization in our code base where we use Rubocop to require you to pass in the full path to a template when you render a template. And then we scan all those, look for all the locals keys, and then we feed them to the Rails compilation engine ahead of time. But if you don't do that, this gives you the same optimization. And it's a pre-compilation step. You can do it at boot before fork. So it really can speed up cold boot performance in Rails in large applications. So like we would deploy GitHub every 30 minutes. Like we would see like 10-minute cold boot factors. So 10 out of every 30 minutes were slower on de-rendering. But with this, it's fast. And our other optimization.
I see why JJ hates it.
Yeah, because he doesn't have big on Rails out to know.
So I guess it's naive to think that was using ERB rendering to begin with when we binded.
What do you mean?
Instead of like defining like a bunch of methods.
Oh, right.
Dynamically, rather than like anytime I've used like ERB directly, it's like or ERB template, give it a binding, and then it just pulls out the local variables from that binding.
I'm not familiar with that mode. I don't think I've ever seen it like that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, that's a record scratch.
Yeah.
I was-
Yeah, that's actually. Yeah, talk. Yeah.
Oh, there's a guy Dan over here. I can set you
No,
up.
I don't think ERB has ever run in an ERB. It's always turned into Ruby. The ERB becomes Ruby before it's ever executed.
So does this interact with ERB at all? Like,
Yeah.
it's got to, right?
No, it actually doesn't. No, it doesn't.
It defines dynamic methods and then gives that binding to ERB.
No, because ERB is just is a intermediate representation of Ruby. So
Okay.
when you write ERB, it is compiled through a couple different implementations of the ERB compiler into Ruby.
Okay.
It becomes this giant at output buffer shovel line for every line in your ERB file. That's what, at least that's my understanding of ERB. I don't know. There might be other versions of it. There might be even a direct evaluator of Ruby of ERB, but my interpretation has always been compiled. Anyone here? No, it sounds like, so it sounds like you don't know. Because I think
You say like ERB template, whatever the
Wash.
Yeah.
You give it a template, you
Gives you
just string
string,
a string.
Yeah.
And then you give it a binding, and then you say like render this thing.
Yeah, because
So intermediately, like what you're saying is that
It
it
turns-
constructs like
Ruby.
code that's executed.
And then it executes it with that in that binding. Yeah, that makes sense.
But then, so what's the dynamic method? Like, if those methods are defined inside the,
So Rails with
okay.
I feel like we should just turn right into talk. So Rails does is it makes what's called a compiled method container. It's actually in action view base. This is why like you can share state in between templates because it's actually one module that has all these functions on it. Like if you go to the GitHub code base, there's one module that has 5,000 odd anonymous generated functions
Okay.
for one for every template. So if you set an IVAR in one, you can access it in all other 4,999 without even passing anything around.
Huh.
Because they're all compiled onto this method container, compiled method container. It's great. It's the reason why like all the Rails magic, like all the form helpers just like work because like you're assuming that the state is shared between them. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. It's awesome, guys. Yeah.
So one thing so if you're curious, like in Hanami, actually, the view layer is actually handled. You actually have a Ruby object for the view layer. And so all you have to do is actually expose the things that you want to actually be punched through in your template. And you actually avoid the code comment that you have up above, like you were showing, because that all goes away if it's all tightly encapsulated within a simple object that's coming in to the template.
That's like what view component, that's effectively what view component does. And that's the whole reason is that like this is asinine, right? Like the reason this exists is that this is the only thing from view component I could convince Rails core to accept. The rest of it, they're just like, this is too much, like it's too heavy, it breaks the Rails mental model. But this is like the one piece they would take back, which is like the ability to declare a signature.
Yeah.
Because the Hanami approach is just like dropping a bomb on your code base. Like you realize all your assumptions about global state are just like screwed when you encapsulate it in an object.
Yeah, it's great because you don't have any extractions in the view layer in Hanami. Like it's just not possible.
That's why it's not Rails.
That's how you really feel.
That's why I like being on that side of the fence a little bit more because it's just you got more control of the code and you know that things are not there's nothing shady going on. Like
So is the view layer in Rails just a bad decision?
This is
Big.
That would be city.
I don't know, how many unicorns were written in Konami?
Yeah.
I know, Joel, he always always beat me up on this one, yeah.
I mean, I'd say it's a good thing as long as it makes you productive and it doesn't make you write bad code, and I would argue that like, from what I've seen, you can write good code without shooting yourself in the foot for a while in the Rails view layer before things get like messy. And this is meant to help you write it a little longer, right? The idea is that like, something like view component is like a further step than it needed to be because of like this addition, right? Like it keeps you a little bit safer.
Yeah, it's super helpful for like refactoring and things too. I mean, like, let's just say using repping the code base.
Yeah, when you've got that 1,000 line view for,
Yeah.
And then you're looking
Well,
for
and
a
it's-
resource in your entire code base. It's like, what's that gonna turn
So
out?
it's like a cloud method container, when you render in a controller, when you set an IVAR in a controller, Rails
Yeah.
looks at the list of all the IVARs that have been set on the controller instance, and it copies them and reassigns them in that context.
Yeah.
That's the reason you can set an IVAR in the controller and use it in the view.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's super wild.
Yeah.
Like, once I like realized
Terrible.
that, I was just like, why?
It's like a copy paste of all your state. Yeah.
Made sense at the time.
It did, like, that's interesting, like, the comment about like when unicorns were written in Nami, like, it's like, it worked, and people shipped a lot of software, like, in Rails. I don't.
Well, it's like, PHP shit, it runs half the internet.
This is the value of like a framework or a language is totally disjoint from the beauty of it. Right, like there's some, or maybe it's not totally disjoint, there's some overlap, but it's not what a lot of developers would like to believe, unfortunately.
That said, I think ease of use helps drive. I mean, I came to Rails from Perl where, hand rolling everything. It was definitely a great leap forward, and I still enjoy working in Rails and don't ever want to look at Perl again.
There's like a really popular like Rust challenger to Rails that was hitting the orange site this week, and like 2 minutes into the demo, they show you what a controller looks like, and I close the window. It's messy everywhere else. Like, I don't know. That's like a, sort of an existential question to ask, like whether the Rails view layer is good or not.
Compared to what?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would guess, like, I would guess like in hindsight, like, if you were to look at it and say.
that's basically my thought tonight. So.
Okay.
He's a plant.
Get him a shirt.
Any other questions for
Before you-
Ben and or Noel? So it's great. Thanks for sharing that.
Good job, Ben.